Alright, so about a day ago or so, Dokkan gave us the official EZA details for this man right here, INT BROLY. Now, for those who do not know, BROLY obviously was the Saiyan Day unit for 2021, so he's been out now for over 3 years, and understandably, a lot of people, including myself, have been waiting and hoping that he would get his EZA. And during the Dokkan Now special, which was about a week ago now, Dokkan pretty much just confirmed that his EZA was going to come, so we've just been patiently waiting to see how they were going to cook. Now, since it's been over a day since the details have been released, not only do we have the translations for the actual kit itself right here, we also have information on Broly's post-EZA stack calculations. So what we're going to do in the vid today is pretty simple and straightforward. We're going to go ahead and break down his EZA kit and his stats and see for ourselves if he is good or bad. But before I go ahead and talk about Broly's EZA, I want you all to go ahead and comment down below what are your thoughts on Broly's EZA as a whole, because there have been quite a few different opinions on it, so I am curious to see where you all stand. In any case though, let's get started with the most important part of Broly's EZA, which is of course his kit. Now, we do have the kit pulled up here. Shout out to Dokkan Wiki, one of many sources that have translated Broly's EZA details. But when we look at the kit itself and start off with the leader skill, right? Broly is now a 170% stat boost leader for planetary destruction and movie bosses, and this may be a bit of a minor point, but I do just want to say I appreciate the fact that Broly is now another usable leader for both of these categories, because when we look at them, there are not that many great options to use. I mean, looking at planetary destruction, right? Planetary destruction only has 4 technical leaders for the category, and only 2 of them are even usable. One right here is the Dokkan Festival First Form Frieza, and the other is right here with INT BROLY post his EZA. And then, I mean, if we look at movie bosses, right? Yes, there are a lot of options for leaders, but only a few are even usable. One is Broly Trio, another is INT BROLY now with his EZA, and of course the third is right here with Carnival LR Broly, who is undoubtedly the best leader for the category since he is a 200% Carnival LR lead. But going back to INT BROLY, right? Him being another kind of usable leader for both of the categories in the current meta is something that I really do appreciate, because I know that it's something I'm going to take advantage of, and I'm sure a lot of other people are going to try to take advantage of this as well. So that is something minor, but still, I really do appreciate that about Broly. Now, moving to the super attack effect, this is where things kind of get interesting, I would say, for Broly, because Broly is able to greatly raise his attack and raise his defense and cause immense damage to the enemy. Now, obviously, he is a stacker for both defense and attack, which is really nice, and when it comes to his attack stacking, greatly raising attack is something we all love. We are so happy that Broly can do this, because that means he's going to ramp up a lot and he's going to do a lot of damage. But the problem for the super attack effect for a lot of people comes right here with the defense stacking, because when it comes to him stacking his defense, he is only stacking his defense by 20% each time he does a super attack effect. So compared to the greatly raising of his attack, it is kind of like a slap in the face in terms of the fact that Dokkan could have allowed Broly to greatly raise both his attack and his defense, but they decided to split it apart, so Broly's defense stacking isn't as high as his attack stacking. So in that sort of sense, it is a bit of a slap in the face. I don't think it's the biggest issue at the end of the day because he's still stacking it, but it is annoying to consider the fact that Broly could have been greatly raising both attack and defense, and they decided, you know what, let's just let Broly become an offensive juggernaut and not allow him to raise his defense in the same manner. So that is kind of like a minor issue, but it is still something that I would say is getting Broly a lot of flack from the community. Now moving on to the passive, right? Obviously the passive is probably the most important part of Broly's EZA kit. So Ki plus 3 and attack and defense 260%. That in and of itself is actually a pretty good kind of start off for Broly's passive. Also, in general, reduces damage received by 26% and increases chance of performing a crit hit by 26% as well. So there's no turn restrictions, there's no sort of limitations. The fact that this is available to Broly throughout an entire fight is something I really do like about it, because obviously he is only raising his defense by 20% per stack, so this is just a nice little extra kind of bonus to help make up for this kind of issue as far as Broly's super attack effect is concerned. Also, launches an additional attack that has a high chance to become a super. Obviously, if it does end up supering, then that's another opportunity for Broly to raise his attack and his defense. Also, plus an additional 26% to his attack and defense when attacking in general, so that's pretty easy to reach as well. Now we go into the interesting parts of his EZA passive though. So, plus an additional key +3 and launches an additional attack that has a great chance to become a super, and also increases damage reduction by 18% and chance of performing a crit hit by 18% as well, within the same turn after performing a super when there is a Pure Saiyans, Hybrid Saiyans, or Movie Heroes category enemy. So, this is where some of the restrictions start to show themselves in Broly's kit. Now, before the EZA came into play, Broly was already kind of designed to work specifically against Pure Saiyans and Hybrid Saiyan type of units, so they pretty much kind of doubled down on that, made it a bit better. So, I mean, the restrictions themselves are not too bad. There are a lot of difficult fights that focus on a Pure Saiyans unit or a Hybrid Saiyan unit or a Movie Heroes category enemy, so this is not the most difficult restriction in the world, and I mean, in terms of what it gives, it's pretty nice, right? But still, at the same time, it is a restriction nonetheless, because not every fight is going to include a Pure Saiyan, or a Hybrid Saiyan, or a Movie Hero opponent. So, in that sort of sense, Broly will miss out on this part of his kit. So, yeah, I mean, it's still pretty accessible, I would say, in the grand scheme of the game, but it is still a restriction nonetheless, so we do kind of have to acknowledge that in that sort of sense. Also, beyond that, right, launches an additional guaranteed super attack, reduces damage received by another 15%, and increases chance of performing a crit by another 15% as well within the same turn after performing a super when there is an enemy whose name includes Goku. Now this is where I would say the restrictions start to go from like slightly annoying to quite frustrating, because it's already bad enough to have to face like a Pure Saiyans or a Hybrid Saiyans or a Movie Heroes opponent, right? But now to have to specifically face a Goku, that's where it becomes annoying, right? Because, yes, canonically, it makes sense. Broly was obsessed with Goku. He just hated Goku since they were born, right? But at the same time, does that mean the Dokkan has to include a Goku unit restriction on Broly's passive? Me, personally, I don't think so, and I think a lot of people share that sort of frustration. But, you know, in terms of Broly's potential, I think he has quite a lot of potential in terms of his passive, right? Between the damage reductions, right? 26% right here, plus another 18 right here, plus 15. That means Broly can get up to 59% damage reduction on top of all the supers he can do, which will help him stack his attack and his defense. So I think in terms of his potential, Broly has a lot to offer, and it can be quite good. But at the same time, we're talking about half of his passive pretty much being locked behind some sort of restriction. And again, I don't think the Pure Saiyans, Hybrid Saiyans, or Movie Heroes restriction is that bad. But the Goku one, yeah, that's where it's starting to get a bit annoying for sure. So, I mean, yeah, Broly, the potential's there. I just think in terms of what he's being limited to, that is a big problem for Broly, and I think that's why a lot of flack is thrown towards Broly's direction in terms of the community's kind of opinion of his EZA. But aside from looking at the overall kind of kit, we also did talk about some of the stats, right? So going over here, shout out to Halvard, I don't know how to say his name, so I do apologize, man, but shout out to you. Obviously, a big Broly fan, and he actually posted the EZA stats for INT Broly. So it is worth mentioning at this point that a lot of people try to compare INT Broly and his EZA to Tech Gohan and his EZA, and there's a lot of interesting things about that. Obviously, both of them can stack their attack and defense, but also beyond that, when we look right here with the stats for Broly after his EZA, we see 21.5k for his HP, 21k almost with the attack, and 13k with the defense, right? If we look at Tech Gohan, and we see his EZA 100% hidden potential stack kind of setup here, we see 21k HP right there, 21k on the attack, almost 21.5 actually, and then also 13k on the defense. So in terms of stats, these two are pretty much in the same level. They're pretty much in the same boat. So that is really, really crazy. That is really awesome. And I mean, in terms of just what they're kind of starting off with, both Broly and Tech Gohan kind of start on the same base, right? It's just that afterwards, things start to change. Because for one, Gohan isn't necessarily getting as high of stat boost as Broly is to start things off, right? But also in contrast, Gohan at the very least is greatly raising both his attack and defense, whereas Broly is again just raising his attack greatly and just raising his defense by 20% per stack. So, I mean, yeah, there is a bit of a trade-off between the two units, but in terms of a starting point, it is very interesting that both of them kind of have the same stats for their HP, attack, and their defense. Also on top of that, again, shout out to Halvard, I don't know how to say his name again, sorry man, but shout out to him again. He did kind of give a more in-depth breakdown on the overall defensive calculation. So what we see right here at the bottom is that essentially for INT Broly, the max possible defense for him is around 1.7 million. Now, this coupled with his damage reduction, I think will be quite nice. But again, you know, looking back at that kit, the fact that half of his damage reduction pretty much is blocked by the whole kind of restrictions against certain types of category limits and also facing a certain Goku enemy, yeah, I think all of that means that we won't necessarily get to see this peak potential that often, but when we do see it, I think Broly is going to be fantastic. So, you know, if you ask me, you know, if Broly is good or bad with his EZA, I will personally say that I think Broly is a really good EZA. Now, do I think he's the best EZA in the game? I don't think so, because while I think he has a lot of great elements, while I think his potential is really good, in fact, I think his potential may be better than Gohan's because of all the damage reduction and everything, I think at the same time, the fact of the matter is that his potential is being blocked by so many restrictions that it's almost ridiculous to kind of look at Broly and say, oh, well, we're going to get his potential every single second of every single fight. So that's unrealistic, right? More likely, we're just going to be seeing the 26% with the damage reduction and all these kind of flat stat boosts and all this sort of stuff. So in that sort of sense, I do think that he's probably not the best EZA in the game, but I think he has the potential to be considered for that argument, and I think realistically speaking, he's still pretty damn good. So that's just my kind of thoughts on Broly in terms of his EZA and all that sort of stuff. In any case, though, that's going to do it for the vid. If you guys enjoyed it, of course, hit the like button down below. Also, subscribe so you can see more vids like this in the future. And again, comment down below your guys' personal thoughts on the EZA for INT Broly. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think he's just mid as a whole? Let me know your feelings in the comments down below. And feel free to check out some of the other vids I have on my channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.